Hello, everyone. My name is Leanne. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the programming manager at the Barrick Museum of Art. Thank you all for joining us tonight. This talk is hosted by the Mojave Project and the Barrick Museum of Art at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. Funding for our webinar series is provided by the California Humanities, a nonprofit partner of the National Endowment for the Humanities. Visit calhum.org in order to learn more. We invite you to attend the upcoming webinar scheduled monthly during the exhibition of the Mojave Project on view at the Barrick Museum through the end of July 2022. Please visit our website at www.unlv.edu/Barrick Museum for more information and to register for the next webinar. At the end of the discussion, we will open the conversation up with questions from our audience. Please post your questions in the Q&A tab at the bottom of your Zoom screen rather than the chat window. Before we begin tonight's conversation, I would like to say a land acknowledgement. The Mojave Project and the UNLV's Barrick Museum of Art acknowledges the indigenous people of the Mojave Desert, including the Chemehuevi, Mojave, Serrano, Southern Paiute, Timbisha Shoshone, and Western Shoshone, all who continue to occupy and persist throughout this arid region today. We encourage you to become familiar with the indigenous people of the lands you occupy. I'm pleased now to welcome artist and curator Kim Stringfellow.
Good evening. I'd like to thank you for joining us tonight for this discussion, which is the highlight of the 2022 Mojave Project webinar series. As the Mojave Project's director, I'm honored to host tonight's conversation along with UNLV's Barrick Museum of Art, the Native American Land Conservancy, the Cultural Conservancy, and the Mojave Desert Land Trust have co-partnered with us to present this event. California Humanities has generously supported this webinar series through the Humanities for All Quick Grant Program. Please welcome tonight's speakers, who include Matthew Leivas Sr., a Chemehuevi elder, salt song singer, environmental activist. He is the former tribal council member and chairman of the Chemehuevi Indian tribe at Lake Havasu, California. Matt is one of the founding board members of the Native American Land Conservancy. Michael Madrigal is an enrolled member of the Cahuilla Band of Mission Indians near Anza, California, and is also a founding member of the Native American Land Conservancy. Michael has served on its board of directors for a number of years and is currently board president. He is presently enrolled in the Ethnic Studies, American Indian Studies graduate program at UC Riverside. Melissa K. Nelson is an ecologist, media maker, Indigenous scholar activist. Formerly a professor of American Indian Studies at San Francisco State University, she now teaches Indigenous sustainability at Arizona State University. From 1993 through 2021, she served as the founding executive director and CEO of the Cultural Conservancy. She continues to serve as president of their board, focusing on land protection and bicultural revitalization. She is Anishinaabe, Métis, Norwegian, and a member of the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa Indians. Ashley Hummers is an enrolled member of the Fort Mojave Indian tribe, whose reservation spans California, Arizona, and Nevada. She is tribal administrator for her nation, specializing in multi-state development and management of tribal economies and government. Ashley holds a BA from Yale University and a graduate certificate in nonprofit management and Masters of Public Administration from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. As some of you know, Philip Plasky, also affiliated with the Cultural Conservancy and San Francisco State University, had been scheduled as one of tonight's speakers. I regret to share that Philip passed away on April 12th of this year. As one of Mojave Project's humanities experts, Philip's deep knowledge of historical and contemporary issues related to the Mojave Desert helped guide this endeavor during its early development phase. In addition, he contributed a remarkable first-person dispatch of his direct involvement with the 15-year Ward Valley campaign, a multi-tribal effort organized to stop a proposed nuclear waste dump near Needles, California, that led to the protection of the sacred landscape. Philip's dear friend, Matt Leivas, will lead us in a remembrance of Philip before we begin our program.
Thank you. I'm quite honored, blessed to have been invited to partake in this webinar and to speak on about our dear lost friend, Phil Plasky. You know, a lot of the work that had been started back in the early days with our fight against the Ward Valley, things are really difficult because there was a communication gap amongst the tribes and the powers that be. And I can recall meeting Phil Plasky at the Ward Valley at a protest in the early 90s and befriended him. We became good, loyal friends, close. Call him my brother. In my house, been to his homes. But in talking with the friends about him lately, it was brought to my attention that the work that I do now was because of my relationship with Phil Plasky and what he had brought to the table. Inspiration, vision. But most importantly was the power of the pen and how can he could express himself and convey a message. It was really wonderful knowing him and getting to know Catherine, and getting to know all the rest of the brothers and sisters at the Cultural Conservancy, but you know, that bond is very strong. But because of his writings and the dialogue that was created by his writings, it allowed us to communicate. And nowadays, I think back about early days of our country, about what was missing. It was a communication. Collaboration, discussion, because of dialogue, language, and foreigners not knowing who we are as Indigenous people. So only if there was a way to communicate in a good way, things could have turned out differently in this country of ours. But by working with Phil and Melissa, Nicole, and everybody else at the Cultural Conservancy, and our dear late friend Vivian Jake, another visionary, the co-founder of the Salton Trail Project, we formed a bond and we created the Salton Trail Project map that had people shaking in their boots after we showed it and let them know that we are the Southern Paiutes. We are Chemehuevis, yes, but we are still Southern Paiutes because that's where we migrated from. We came from out Charleston, settled here along the Colorado River back in the 1700s. And we became Chemehuevis here in Chemehuevi Valley. So our traditional name is Nuwu, meaning the people of all the Southern Paiute bands. But when he came here, they were given a name inadvertently just because they were describing the way they ran when they came to this valley. After coming through the desert, after who knows how long, but coming to the river, seeing the mesquite beans ready for harvest along the Colorado River, hungry, tired, thirsty, they ran to the river. And when they ran like roadrunners. And that's the way they described them. A Chemehuevi, run, roadrunner. So the word came out, a Chemehuevi, Nukwikwan, they're running like roadrunners. So whenever they refer to the Nuwu that settled here in Chemehuevi Valley, we're known as a Chemehuevi. So the name eventually changed because of the dialects. The Mojaves referred to us as a Chemehuevi. And when the Spaniards finally found out who we were, they referred to us as the Chemehuevi. And that's where our name was written and printed. I mean, we were first known as Chemehuevi. But we've had formed a bond with all the tribes, and I want to thank all the work that Phil did in the early days, because I didn't realize what he says. Everything was falling apart. Everything was falling apart with the movement. But you stepped in and you helped bring it together. So no, it wasn't just me, it was you and all the other people who worked in collaboration in one spirit, protect Mother Earth, and we're still doing it today. So I pay my love and respect to Phil. Everybody else that missed him, I loves him. And our map. There's one name that is missing on this map right here, and we need to add is the Paiuchis. They're another group for our people that I found in San Bernardino and along the Mojave River, but the Paiuchis are our people. Simply misnamed by the Spaniards who couldn't say Paiute, the Paiuchis. But Emmanuel Olagi and his family are the last of the Paiuchis that were from that area. So we want to add them on to the Salt Song Trail map and work on redoing this map. But this map shows our territory and it shows where we were in the Ward Valley, but all the different areas where we're singing about in the song. It's all about love and respect, honoring Mother Earth, Creator, the cosmos, the stories, the legends, but remembering. And that's what we do. We remember Phil Plasky. Thank you very much. God bless. Wonderful pictures, Melissa.
So Matt, would you like to continue and tell us about the Salt Song Trail and the old?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, when the Native American Land Conservancy was just a thought, a suggestion, we thought it was going to be something that was going to be very, very hard to accomplish, but we all were in that one spirit. We wanted to form an organization that was going to try to protect these sacred sites that were being desecrated and destroyed by people who don't know the importance of them. So the NALC was formed, and we were able to protect and acquire some lands and the Old Woman Mountain properties, and we just befriended another group of landowners on the opposite side of the Old Woman Mountains, just on the other side of the Old Woman Mountain statue. We befriended another group of people who owned the properties over there and had money in hand when this Old Woman Mountain property was available, which we now own, the 2,550 acres. But they had money in hand to purchase that. We befriended them and they befriended us, and we've been sharing information about the knowledge and the history about the Old Woman Mountains. And because these are avid hikers and true ecologists, they've hiked all around that mountain and found 80 springs. Just a small number of them are still running, but they located 80 springs around that whole mountain. But back in the day, you can imagine majority of them were flowing, but a lot of these things have been interrupted because of the extractions of water and pumping of water from all along the Mojave Desert. Little towns like Essex, Amboy, and things like this, pumping water from that aquifer that feeds Bonanza Springs and Cadiz. And this is a big fight with us right now, trying to protect the Cadiz aquifer from Cadiz Water Inc. from marketing water to whomever they want. But that 5,000 acre farm at Cadiz should not be there. But it was only there. It's only there because of money. It's only there because of money and what people speculate they can make off this thing. 1983, it wasn't there. But you can imagine how much water they've been extracting out of that basin all these years, and how much water has been depleted since then. And all these aquifers are being affected by one means or another, and Colorado River is being threatened because of drought. Tribes are being restricted from using as much water as we wanted to on the Chemehuevi Indian Reservation. We've been restricted for so many years, and for whatever reasons that federal government, the powers that be held against us, they prevented us from developing our agricultural lands to 1,900 acres. So we only have an 80-acre farm, but we're doing organic farming, and we created a whole new ecosystem out here on this desert mesa that I'm very proud of, because this ecosystem is a complete change in what it started out to be. It's just open desert, and now it's growing crops and then regenerating, and all this other microorganisms, organisms in the ground are all coming back, and wildlife are coming back. We even have deer in our farm now, whereas 20 years, 30 years ago, we had nothing but donkeys here. But because we've had projects to eliminate donkeys with the BLM, we've extracted a number of them, and allowing more feed for the native deer to come back. So we have 3 herds of deer on the reservation now. But you know, back in the day when I was a game warden, I was the only liaison between the tribe and the powers that be outside the reservation, and we had to go out and voice our concerns and opinions about projects happening outside of our reservation boundaries. And that's what got me involved in land protection and trying to protect sacred sites local. West Well, it's on the Salton Trail map. We protected that with the help of the Bureau of Land Management. Homey Chump, which is along the Colorado River, in Topa Gorge, and Mitchell Caverns, as well as other places, now the Old Moon Mountains. But you know, all these areas have been infringed upon, and since the late 1970s, since the Bureau of Land Management did their desert conservation plan, all it did was expose the desert and allow capitalism to step in and start proposing all kinds of operations, from mining in the beginning, then eventually the solar, wind, and what's happening with all these things is disrupting the whole ecosystem and putting things where they shouldn't be. But you know, as an Indigenous person, we fight very hard to try to protect what we have on our reservation lands, but outside of reservation lands as well, because the laws that are supposedly protecting sacred sites and land resources are not effective enough. They're not doing their job. So we as Indigenous people, we have to put our best foot forward and do our due diligence and research to try to find out what the issues are and try to find some type of solution. One thing I want to say about Phil Plasky and the work that he was doing with the Banned Waste Coalition that they started was a concept, an idea for storage of low-level nuclear waste. And now that was retrievable, monitored, packaged storage of nuclear waste. And guess what? Lo and behold, the federal government is doing this in Nevada test site. They have a state-of-the-art facility that is doing exactly what Phil Plasky was envisioning 30 years ago. Proud of him. But you know, it takes those type of people with visions to start thinking about these things, of not just looking at the desert as a vast wasteland and a sand pit to put things in. And what really blew my mind back in the days of going to Hanford and seeing that nuclear facility in operation and seeing the waste stream going into an open sand pit, that blew my mind. I couldn't believe I was seeing what I was seeing. But there was no rhyme or reason, pretty much. There was containers, yes, and packaged stuff, but in a big sand pit, 50 feet deep, like 4 football fields wide, and eventually can be covered up with sand. How many miles from the Columbia River? How many miles from the nuclear facility? So what makes you think, you know, what's going on with these people's minds? You know, they look at these things, the desert as a vast wasteland. You could throw anything out there and get rid of it and not worry about it. Well, no, it's a vast ecosystem that'll feed you, give you medicine, take care of you, give you water, give you whatever you want. But just don't abuse it, you know, and that's the thing. The lands have been so abused. Mother Earth is so tired of the abuse that's being infringed upon her every day. The mining, the probing, the oil, the gas, everything be taken out of it. What's happening underneath with all these voids? going to be filled in, right? By water or some other type of pressure because of hydraulics. Well, it's happening. Yellowstone's about ready to go. Circle of fire, the ring of fire around the earth is about ready to go. And mankind continues on and raping Mother Earth. Mother Earth's tired. Like all those indigenous people are tired. Reminds me of Floyd Western's song. They didn't listen. They didn't listen. So communication, and that's what I'm getting at, communication. And get back to other things about land resources and NAGPRA. What NAGPRA is allowed to be done on private lands, desecrating sacred sites, removal of remains, marketing, profiteering everywhere they go. Everything's about money, money, money. And to us, it's not. It's about living and carrying on and taking care of Mother Earth, take care of ourselves, our families. But we're people of the earth. That's who I am. I'm Nuwo. And I speak the language. I sing the song, the salt song. Nuk mi ounce of nu nukad. Nuk mi ounce. Ampang. I know a little bit, I can speak a little bit. But how to nuk how kun haiku ampang? I speak real good English. I speak real good white man. So I can communicate. And that's not just what boarding schools did. That's just what my mother told us to do. You have to go to school. You have to get educated because you're living in two worlds. You be here in your homeland and do your thing, run barefoot and whatever you want, live your life. But you know you have to go to school. You're gonna have to get you the education. So she ordered all of her children, just get your high school education. After that, you can do whatever you want in the world. Go to college for the education, go to military, do whatever you want, but get your high school education under your belt first before you step out in this world. So we all did. And that brings up other issues like the Indian boarding schools and what led to other things that transpired with the creation of NABS, the Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition, and the fight that they're leading to expose what's happened at the boarding schools throughout the country. Now, this is the work that came out on behalf of the NALC. And the first video we did with them at Sherman Institute Cemetery to sing those children home. That was just one of the many boarding schools. And we went to 3 of the boarding schools, which was Sherman Indian High School, originally Sherman Institute, Stewart Indian Boarding School in Carson, Nevada, and the last one was at Chemehuevi. And we hope to do more, but Salton Trail project has to be reorganized. But that's other projects that we do. And the Salton Trail project was all about bringing back those songs of our people and reconnecting our people with the land and re-indigenizing our people. And it led to a lot of other things since the early 90s and my awakening by culture and my purpose. Peace and Dignity Journeys was one, of which I was the coordinator for the California run and worked with them till the 2000. And also took part in the Peace Flame journey and getting the Peace Flame back to Santa Barbara in the 90s. But all these sacred runs that have taken place, we've taken part in it and helped with the reconnection and the focusing on our people and re-indigenizing our people. But we have to understand the land, we have to understand our people, we have to understand our culture, we have to understand everybody. We have to understand what's happening not only on our land, but everything that's around us, 360 degrees. So, I don't know what's more I can say about this, but, the Mojave Desert has been viewed as a wasteland, and it certainly is not. And it's got to be looked at with a pair of fresh eyes and ears.
Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you. My God. I appreciate everybody's partaking in this because of the vast area that it covers throughout the country. People are hearing this. And I know there's been numerous journalists out here interviewing people like myself about boarding schools and about land issues, but it's the truth. And you know, the bottom line is the whole truth about what's happening is all about money. It's all about money, and that's sad. It's really sad because you look at what it's gotten us into. Look at what it's gotten this country into over the past 6 years. It's all about money. It's sad.
Okay. Michael, would you
I
like
think
to
I have a lot of questions.
follow up with some of the points that Matthew was speaking to?
Yes, good evening, everyone. And thank you, Matt, Mock. Good sharing, lots of important messages for all of us. There's so much history across Mojave, and you've participated in a lot of it. And we're so blessed, you know, to have you share those experiences with us. And of course, that history goes back even further. I was wondering if there's something more that you might share about places in the Mojave, like the Old Woman Mountains Preserve, your times there, or Bonanza Springs, just things that you've shared with your community in those places?
Sure, yeah. There's one thing I intend to do is to go out to the Old Woman Mountain properties again, out to the preserve, and I'm going to visit the springs out there, and I'm going to try to revive one of the springs. And I've done this one time before here local at West Well at Hawaii, and I went out. I cleaned the spring out, and I prayed. I worked all day by myself, and it was a chore, but I cleaned the whole area of the spring out and everything, and walked away. And when I walked away, I looked on the ground, and there was something on the ground, and it was a crook stick, an arrowweed, about 2 feet long. It was all splintered on both ends. And I looked at it and I says, a para. And in our language, the newer language, the para is a shaman's staff. And there it was laying on the ground. So I picked it up and I felt blessed and honored that Creator would give this to me as a gift. Well, I got it and I thanked Creator, and I went back to my truck and cleaned it up and smudged it and prayed, and I talked to the spirits, talked about what I'm doing, and went back over. After I smudged everything, I went back over to the spring after I took my break and went back down and started cleaning a little more, and I got that para. I cleaned up and I said, I'm going to pray for water. I'm going to try to bring the water back. So I reached in the bank of the spring like that, and I started probing the para into the clay, and it went in a little bit, then came out, nothing. Went over just 4 inches more, and went in and probed, and it went in easily and pulled out, and muddy water started flowing out. And I thought about, when I was doing this, I was thinking about the Ward Valley days, when one of the medicine men, a Hopi medicine man, Mr. Banyaka, was down here, and Alfredo Figueroa and Philip Smith took him up to Spirit Mountain at Awikume, and they went to show him the spring at Grapevine Canyon. The spring wasn't running. And he says, what's wrong? What's wrong? Spring's usually running. We don't know why it's not running, but the spring's not running. So they said he started praying and talking in the Hopi language, and reached through his little medicine pouch, pulled out his corn pollen and prayed and blessed the area and touched the ground with his staff. Lo and behold, the water started flowing just that instantly. Well, Philip and Alfredo were just blown away by that whole experience. They were looking at him with astonishment, and he asked them, "What's the matter?" He said, "Well, how'd you do that? How did you do this?" And he said he turned and looked at him very calmly. He says, "Why? Don't you people do this anymore?" So with that in mind, I just have to do this and it'll happen. So that was one of my things I want to do out of the Old Mountains, is take that back out to the Old Mountains and have another experience like I had out there a few years back with Jeff Johnson and that bighorn sheep. That bighorn sheep came to me and was standing right above me, and I didn't know it. But all that time I was singing and praying. And that bighorn sheep, that's my clan. That's the Nuo clan. So they came, they understood the songs, they remembered it. But like I said, I didn't see this, but Jeff Johnson experienced it. He saw this, witnessed the whole thing, and he was standing about 30 feet above me on the rocks and listening, he said, just watching me. So, those types of blessings, they'll come if you pray for them, and you pray for these good things, but it's making a connection with the land. And that's one thing Old Mountains properties did for me. It's helped me with my rejuvenation of my spirit, my whole being of who I am. That photo that I got is more than that, because it allowed me to express who I really am. I'm the chief of the Chemehuevis. I'm a Chemehuevi chief, but except for that, because my grandfather, Henry Hanks, was the last full-blooded Chemehuevi chief. And it's in my blood, it's in my DNA, and I've been doing these things for the past 40 years, pretty much secretly. It's just my brother and I, Ace, knowing what I'm doing. But I've had to keep it that way because it's not accepted in this world today. So those types of things, you just don't go out and boast about and brag about, and it's not worth it. You got to do what you got to do in your life and your time, and take advantage of situations like this, because it's only going to come around once. You're either going to be a part of it or you're not going to be a part of it. And when the Creator calls upon you to do these things, He blesses you to do this, and guides you and keeps on bringing all these other things to you. There's a reason for it. Is to bring messages. And you know this well as I do, Michael, about what the whole purpose is, is to communicate. Your brother Luke was a good one at this. He did this. And he's gone, but his daughters are doing this. Linda's doing this. Your other brothers are, all your families, as a matter of fact, but it's just doing that outreach and being a part of your community and getting your people involved. And when we took part in making that video with the KCET, and we're had people out, the youngsters out here at Westwell, I was just amazed and impressed by hearing them talk, because there was no script for them. They weren't coached in anything. Everything that flowed out of their mouth came out from the heart, and it was just a discussion that they had, but everything came out from the heart. But it showed the connection that they had made with that land, nearby. And if we hadn't protected it, they would never made any connection with that. But we educate them and tell them how important that place is to our people. And we sing about all these places in our salt song. The Old Mountains, we sing about all that area. And their sacred songs and out west, that's where they sing Creator, out in that area. And some of the songs, they say that one particular song, the women would not sing that song because they were fearful. They went and hid, because Creator came out, Ocean came out and showed herself to everybody out here to the west. So that's part of the visions that I brought about, and part of my whole purpose of going out to Santa Barbara next month is we're doing prayer, and I'm going to show you all something. Y'all see this good?
Mm-hmm.
This came to me in the hospital last year as a gift from one of the nurses, a white woman. You heard me talking about the loneliest whale in the world traveling the earth, singing its mother song, and my friend Kurt Rousseau from Washington State, who told me about the Lummies. Whole purpose of sending the totem as a gift to the Biden administration was to make the public conscious and aware about Tokatai in captivity in Miami for the past 40 years, 41 years now, singing its mother's song in that aquarium. They know the family that this orca came from. They know its name. They know that it's going around this aquarium for the past 40 years, singing its mother's song. I'm trying to rationalize this. This poor whale is just like a Indian being taken away to the boarding school and shown tricks for food. You have to jump and you have to swim and we'll give you fish. That's all you have to do because we're gonna make money off you. And that's exactly what's being done. Capitalism, greed, and everything's about money, and it's sad because creatures like this are paying the price. It's like all in the zoos, all the creatures are paying a price. Think about it. Tokatai has to be released. That totem went all the way to Washington, 2,900 miles out of its way into California, Los Angeles, San Diego, then all the way to Miami, then all the way up to Washington last year. And this gift came to me. So that's part of my vision of my whole purpose of going out to the coast, because I'm a chief for our people. I got to bring those prayers from the East Coast, California, to the West Coast, to the Western Gate, because that's the calling. And I didn't do this, it just came to me. And that's the way it works. And that's the way it works with the land. It calls you. The mountains will call you. We sing these songs, we call upon all these spirits. When we talk about that, about the spirits, about what has been created because of disruption of human remains and burials and things like this that have disrupted the way things were supposed to be. You live, you die, there's ceremony for you, you're laid to rest forever, hopefully. Sadly, people don't see it that way. They say, oh, there's some bones, let's dig it up and let's see what this person ate. Let's see what created this, let's see what created that, but they have no purpose for this. And that's a sad thing, is because on private property in the Four Corners area, that was allowing private landowners to go in there and desecrate graves and take whatever they want for money with no repercussions. Any other place in this world, in this country, you can't do that on our reservations, anywhere else. But yet, they allow people on private land to do this. Disruption in this world has been created because of all these remains, and people have been taking and desecrating sacred sites, remains, funerary objects, putting them in boxes, putting them in basements, putting them in cellars, and stashing them away. Hundreds and thousands of remains. All these spirits throughout the country that are floating around here, disrupting things and manifesting themselves in people. It's happening, folks, and there people are making it happen. We can stop it. We can all stop this. We can all get these remains returned. We could all repatriate all these remains. We could all reconcile. We can send soldiers to foreign countries where they fought battles and foreign wars to reconcile with their enemies. Why can't we do it in our own country? Why can't we have total reconciliation and truth in our own country? Hopefully this program will bring it out. The truth will come out. It's gonna hurt a lot of people. It's gonna be sad. The boarding school experiences, you know, from back in the early days were atrocious. Should have never happened, but they were allowed to happen because of the powers that be and people not caring. But there are good people out there with a lot of big hearts, a lot of people who care. And that's what we're doing, is bringing all these people together. NALC is a big part of this, Michael. You're a big part of this. You know, we've been in this movement for some time. And then we've done a lot of outreach just to communicate. And people say, well, why are you doing this? So we want to let people know what we're doing. We want to let them know who we are, where we come from, why we do these things. So we are who we are.
Mock Matthew, yes, thank you for the powerful words, the powerful messages you're giving us this evening. And it really is very fitting, I know, for us to have that sense of reverence and awe for the place that we call the Mojave today, and to have that sense of respect and honor for all of our ancestors who have lived there since the beginning of time, and of course all of our other relatives, the non-human relatives who are in this place. And your words are reminding us of the reality and the necessity of keeping that front and center, keeping that awareness, or cultivating that awareness, I think, in our daily lives. And so again, Mock, thanks so much, Achama. And I know we all want to hear more, and I know that a lot of people have questions, and so we definitely will have some more time for that. And please, Matt, whenever, if you have some other words you need to share, just let us know, and we want to hear from you more during our program today. But yeah, we'll give you a short time, and I'll share a little bit about the Native American Land Conservancy. I guess it's a time now for that. Great, okay.
Yeah.
Yes, and so Matt, you've given the introduction and the background to some of the origins and the most important work that the Native American Land Conservancy has been involved in over the last 22 years, 24 years. And I know it was in the late 1990s when yourself and other members of my family, my older brothers in particular, were involved with the community at the 29 Palms Reservation at Coachella. And that, of course, is the Mike family, in particular, Dean and Teresa Mike, who really have been the vision and the main, you say, instigators and enablers for the establishment and growth of the Native American Land Conservancy. So I definitely, of course, honor and acknowledge them and the other elders who continued to be involved from the very start with the Native Land Conservancy. And as a matter of fact, it was a cultural revitalization or a cultural gathering that started the Native American Land Conservancy, and it was being hosted at the 29 Palms Reservation by the Mike family primarily. And my understanding from what yourself and some of my older brothers have told me, that the dream or the hope of being able to protect the Old Woman Mountains is what kind of put the catalyst behind actually establishing the nonprofit organization in 1998. And so, yes, again, it's the place, it's the Old Woman Mountains who was calling to us as a community that gave birth to the Native American Land Conservancy. So again, that's that's re-emphasizing what you've just shared with us, Matt, about remembering that the mountains call to us that
Yeah.
landscape teaches us. And that again, that's at the heart of what the work of the Native American Land Conservancy is and has been. That is centering and facilitating the ongoing life-sustaining relationships that Indigenous communities have with the landscape. And so the Mojave Desert has been one of the primary areas where our community has worked, the Native American Land Conservancy, because of the partners and the communities like Matthew, the Chemehuevi people, the Mojave people, the Serrano people, the Cahuilla people, have all worked together over these years to actually have the preserves that we are now caring for, the Old Woman Mountain Preserves, which is over, I think, about 2,500 acres. It's, as Matt was saying, a very sacred place, a traditional gathering place of Chemehuevi community, and as Matt said, a place where the salt songs would be sung, the stories would be told. There's a lot of ceremonial sites there, what we call today rock art. It just has this very deep history, and along with those human gathering places, there is, just the energy and the spirit of the mountains, the energy, the spirit of the plants and the animals, as Matt was just sharing with us, how the bighorn sheep came and stood behind him when he was there singing with Jeff. And so, yeah, these are just, very important reminders, a powerful testimony. And they remind us of the wisdom, the teachings that our elders have passed on, continue to pass on to us, which we need to make sure that we are doing our best to honor, that we're doing our best to respect and carry forward those messages. So from my own perspective, I'm a Cahuilla person, and the Mojave Desert is really, kind of at the northern edges of our traditional homelands. And yet it's a very important place to Cahuilla people as well. And in particular, I know that our spiritual leaders have always honored and interacted with the spiritual sites in the Mojave Desert. And we've heard that from various of our elders. I will mention a story that my cousin Sean Milanovich shared recently, that one of our most powerful shaman or medicine leaders, Pedro Chino, would go up into visit the Cadiz Valley area, the Amboy area, to collect salt to use in the community. And that these prayer leaders at that time had the spiritual knowledge to do this in ways that we don't understand today. Now, maybe some people do in our communities, but I don't personally. But it is well known that that these spiritual leaders or pools would travel through the underground aquifers and be able to visit these places without, making the above ground distant journey. They could do this very quickly through a spiritual practice. And so these stories, which are truths, part of our history and who we are as Native people, these are important to us because it helps us to understand and appreciate the depth of relationship that Indigenous people have had and continue to have with all of these landscapes. So it's not just places that become a national park for recreation or appreciation of aesthetics, but it is that. Of course, the Mojave Desert is a tremendously beautiful place and a good place for people to go to for recreation, for healing, and but also, it is a place of great power, a place of great spiritual truth, and a place of spiritual practice for Native peoples. And so, we have to keep that always centered in front and not let that be dismissed and set aside, which so often it is, because the debates about exploitation and development of resources in the desert are always about, cost benefit and, how much money can be made. And obviously, yes, there are benefits to come from the water and the minerals, et cetera, that are contained in the desert. But if those items, if those relations, in the Native worldview, the land is not a commodity. The land is not a resource to exploit. But land is a relative, is family, is kin. And so we always need to pay that proper respect to the land as a living being. And if we're going to take and use things in the desert, then we do it in a respectful way with ceremony. Our elders have taught us you always have to ask permission if you're going to take. You have to greet. You have to, as Matt was saying, you have to sing to these places, pray to these places. And that's the proper way to have a good relationship with these places. And so, that's one of our goals as the Native American Land Conservancy, that we can continue to, enable and facilitate the ongoing practice of our traditional cultures, which, like I say, is really keeping our familiar ties to the land strong and in place. And then we have to do that in the face of so many outside challenges now, which, unfortunately is the reality, that there's continuous pressure to take and take and take and take. And, Indigenous values or traditions tell us that we have to give. We give first, before we take. We give our song, we give our prayer, we make a medicine offering to places before even we take in the peace and beauty of a place, before we take in the water or whatever other things that we need as human beings. We always ask permission before we take, and we give thanks. And so I think these traditions that our elders have given to us are very important. They're necessary for our survival as human beings, not just as Indigenous peoples, but as, people everywhere. And so I think that that's one of the reasons that the Native Land Conservancy really wants to keep that as an, a primary message that we have, and let our work, always be informed by this particular goal or ethic. And so, yeah, it's as I said, Matt, it's great that you've been sharing your experiences and your community experiences in the desert, and it really is it's modeling everything that we're trying to teach other people. Some of these important Indigenous ecological traditions, for one, Indigenous worldviews, Indigenous practices that will be more sustainable. So some of the big challenges, as Matt has already mentioned, that the Native American Land Conservancy is currently struggling with is the pull and the ongoing relentless desire to take water from the Mojave. It's not like the Mojave has tons and tons of excess water that can be sold off to others, for very large profits, but that's what the plans are. Yes, water is life. Water is important to everyone, but we don't believe that it's appropriate to take water from one community, harm them, destroy them, destroy springs and destroy plants and animals that are necessary for the health of the overall ecology of the place, and whose health is also necessary for the ongoing cultural practices of the Native communities. It's not right to sacrifice that for the sake of another community that needs water. We need to be smarter than that. We need to be more responsible than that, because there are better ways. There are other ways to meet the needs of everyone. It requires, as I say, education. It requires different ways of thinking. It requires, creativity and sacrifice. Part of it is being responsible, not to waste and overconsume, which, again, I think is like the American way, is to consume and overuse as much as possible to maximize profits. Well, that doesn't work. We can see that it's leading to the destruction of our very homes, and obviously even of our entire planet. And we can't let that continue to happen. As we know, Indigenous communities are the first that are feeling the impacts of climate change. Entire communities have already been displaced in many places, including in the Arctic, in the Pacific, and probably even much more close. And, we have to realize that if we don't do something responsible, we don't begin to behave and act more responsibly, climate change will displace everyone. We've already seen that the plants and animals are displaced in the Mojave and in our local environments. And how far can they be displaced? It's crazy. It's unsustainable to think that we can all migrate north and that'll solve the problem of climate change. Well, that is part of the coping mechanisms of nature, of course, but that doesn't give us the excuse to go on polluting and excuse to go on making the problem worse. So we've got to, think about how everything is connected, how, honoring and respecting the health of the land is respecting and honoring the health of ourselves and our communities. So I definitely think that that is one of the big themes of the Native Land Conservancy. Yeah, so there's obviously the litigation and challenges that have confronted us from Cadiz Incorporated. And it's an ongoing struggle. The NALC has been involved in litigation with other partners for several years. We were involved back in 2011 in giving testimony and trying to, slow down or stop these water export schemes. But they're going to continue to happen. And I think especially now because of climate change and the ever increasing water shortages, the challenges are only going to be bigger. So we've got to prepare ourselves. We've got to give ourselves renewed strength for the journey, because we're going to have to continue these struggles and battles as we move forward. Another very concerning struggle which NALC is aware of is the lithium mining in the Salton Sea Basin. There are connections there to Cadiz and the Mojave water basin plans to export water, and that's already, been going into the works with the Salton Sea Authority. So we have to keep our eyes open to see all of these things that are happening, and just to look at it in, don't just look at the reports and the studies, but look at what really lays below that. And that is, look at Mother Earth, look at what the impact is going to be on the plants and the animals. If we pay attention to that, then we're looking out for ourselves at the same time. As you know, our elders have always told us that we are the youngest, human beings, and that our elders have a lot to teach us. And that is, of course, the plants and animals have been here much longer than we have. And again, so have the rocks and the mountains and the sun and the moon. They've been here much longer, and they have a lot to teach us. So these are, indigenous pedagogies or epistemologies. This is how our elders and ancestors have learned, and how they have shared this wisdom with generations moving forward. And now we have that responsibility to do it as well. So again, these are like some of the key goals, efforts that the NALC works on. We do this with the Learning Landscapes programming, which brings youth and elders out to our preserves and to other sacred places, so that, stories, songs, teachings can all be shared. We've got to keep that wisdom, strong in our communities, and then continue by sharing it with the general public as well, which of course our friend Matt has been doing all of his life. And so, yeah, thank you, Matt, for bringing these indigenous teachings and ways of living and sharing them with not only our native communities, but with everyone, which I think is our calling as well. Yes.
Yes.
So I know that I may have used up all my time, but I wanted to share a couple of songs, which, if with your permission, of course, and I asked permission of my elders and the ancestors to share the songs for the Cahuilla people. The bird songs are the story of our relationship with the land, and an oral history of where we've traveled in getting to know the land, and meeting the plants and the animals, the rivers, the springs, the mountains. And so each of these songs are in celebration of that and reminding us of our connections to Mother Earth. And so the song I'll share is about the beauty of Mother Earth, which is Palawa Tamale. Palawa Maiko Tamale, Palawa Maiko Tamale, and yawan, ha, Paiwalea, me, Palawa Maiko Tamale, Palawa Maiko Tamale, Palawa Maiko Tamale, and yawan, ha, Paiwalea, me, Palawa Maiko Tamale, Palawa Maiko Tamale, Palawa Maiko Tamale, and yawan, ha, Paiwalea, me, Palawa Maiko Tamale, Palawa Maiko Tamale, Palawa Maiko Tamale, and yawan, ha, Paiwalea, me, Palawa Maiko Tamale, Palawa Maiko Tamale, Palawa Maiko Tamale, and yawan, ha, Paiwalea, me, Palawa, ha, 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 ha. And so again, that is saying how beautiful Mother Earth, how beautiful you are. And so it's an expression of gratitude to the land and all of the healing energy, all of the life-giving sustenance that comes to us from the land. So yeah, finally, I just want to let y'all know that we have ongoing programs. We want people to be involved in our work. We need helpers in our work. We need supporters. Go to our website, which was on the screen a few minutes ago. It's nativeamericanland.org. And on our website, you'll find links for a donate button. You'll find links for our social media streams on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So please check out the Native American Land Conservancy. And yeah, watch out for some of our upcoming programs. And yeah, talk with Matt, because Matt is one of our key founding board members, and he knows all about us. So again, Mock, Achama, thank you everyone for letting me share a little bit today.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Melissa, would you like to begin?
Yes, well, Chemehuevi, thank you so much, Matthew and Michael, for your beautiful presentations. You've been my teachers and mentors and guides for many moons here, going on decades. So it's really an honor to share the space with you and to meet you, Ashley. Thank you so much. Bujunintino Maganatug, Melissa Indigeni Kaz, Makunzi Gabawi, Kidash Nindigo, Nin Anishinaabe Ikwe, Pijudo Dame, Mikanakwajuing, Turtle Mountain Chippewa, and Dunjiba. I greeted you all as relatives. Hello, good evening. I extend a warm heart and a warm hand to you all. My name is Melissa Nelson. My Ojibwe name is Makunzi Gabawik. I'm a proud member of the Turtle Mountain Chippewa Nation and a member of the Lynx clan. And so I'm calling in today on the flanks of Mount Tamalpais and Coast Miwok territory, the sovereign lands of the Federated Indians of Great and Rancheria in Northern California. And thanks to relocation, I've been a displaced Chippewa woman in Northern California. And I've learned so much from the people of this land, the Sinkyone, Pomo, Ohlone, Coast Miwok. And really, my whole adult life have been working to serve the people of the land that you spoke so eloquently about, Matt and Michael, keeping alive our traditional knowledge, our songs, our stories, our traditions. And so I was happy to find the Cultural Conservancy as a young woman and have been working with this organization going on 30 years this year. And the organization is going on its Yes, and the organization is going on its 37th year with new, vibrant young leadership. We are an intertribal organization based in San Francisco, again, founded in 1985. Our original slogan back then was returning native lands to native hands. So our founders were a little ahead of their time, and settlers were not quite ready to hear that message. Fast forward to 2022, and we have the Land Back movement, the Native Land Trust movement with you leaders here, co-management, land rematriation. So all of these stories are finally being heard more and more by the mainstream, the persistence of our elders, the persistence of our leaders. And I want to thank my brother, Phil Plasky, for really introducing me to you, the Southern California tribes. We met in the 90s, had a lot of mutual interest in writing. We met at a writers conference. And then I heard him give a presentation about Ward Valley. Cultural Conservancy joined that battle and advocated on behalf of the protection of Ward Valley through Phil's leadership. And that's how I met Matt and then Vivian and the Salt Song Trail Project, and was very fortunate to be at many of the early gatherings with you, Michael, and members of your family, and Matt, your extended clan and family. And, you know, the formation of the Native American Land Conservancy, and what a great model of land trust. The Cultural Conservancy was partially founded by Claire Cummings, who is an environmental attorney, non-Native woman, very strong environmental attorney advocating for sacred site protection. So we always had a strong focus on returning native lands to native hands, and protecting ancestral sites through many different means. And so we helped form a couple of native land trusts through her legal support, our capacity building grants and work. And so fast forward to 2019, and the Cultural Conservancy, after supporting other tribes, many unrecognized tribes in California who have been disenfranchised through historical colonialism, who did not have access to traditional lands, like many of the Ohlone people here in the San Francisco Bay Area, for example, or the Tongva people in Los Angeles area. So many tribes are unrecognized. So trying to open up access agreements for basket weavers and medicine gatherers and for people to pray at their sites. So this has been the work of the Cultural Conservancy for decades, and Phil Plasky was an incredible leader, an incredible brother, an incredible warrior on so many levels. And I just really am glad to take a moment to honor him at the beginning with your beautiful words, Matthew. Thank you. And to the family who are here with us tonight. I want to show a few more slides. We don't have any current projects with the with the Mojave Desert, except for support with NALC through various collaborations and philanthropic partnerships. And we have been working really more on food sovereignty and organic farming. I know a passion of Matt Leivas's and seed keeping. So my team at the Cultural Conservancy has put together a wonderful little presentation here that I want to share a few slides. So do you see the images there? Yeah. So we continue the work of Phil in the creation of the Storyscape project with protecting stories and songs and media work and recordings. Also, we continue to work very strongly with youth and elders of many different nations throughout Turtle Island, North America, but we focus very much in California, the lands where we live on, even though we know that's an artificial creation, the proud native peoples of California and the southwestern territories of modern day Arizona, New Mexico, and southern Utah. And so the work with Matthew and Vivian and Phil was such a profound experience, serving the goals of so many of the southwestern tribes. Our local ecosystem in Northern California really works with many different peoples of this very beautiful land that has been so developed and yet still contains so much biodiversity and cultural diversity. And we are now land stewards of 2 sites. Our headquarters are in the Presidio of San Francisco, of course, former military, horrific Spanish colonial history that we've been working to decolonize and re-indigenize with the Ohlone peoples. We also work at College of Marin at a farm, a community farm, the Indian Valley Organic Farm, where we're growing native seeds and beautiful Three Sisters food crops, and also tending the wild, cultivating the beautiful oak woodlands and other areas there with local Coast Miwok and Pomo and other folks. And then in 2019, we received the gift of land of an 8-acre farm up in Sonoma County. So we are currently cultivating our farm at Sonoma County in Coast Miwok, Southern Pomo territory, called Heron Shadow, where we work on native foodways, native arts, basket weaving, wood carving, many different forms of art production, traditional indigenous heritage, native media. We continue to do media workshops like we started with Phil with our Spear projects. Matt will remember the Storyscape project, ethnographic audio recording trainings. And so we continue that media work with many different communities, indigenous folks globally. And again, for many years, 7 years, we had our Guardians of the Waters youth program that worked with youth and elders, learning how to clear the springs, learning hands-on tools and traditional ecological knowledge. How do we gather seeds? How do we protect seeds? How do we plant seeds? How do we clean up the water? How do we pray and sing to our waters? What are the traditions from our various ancestry that hold the water as sacred, hold our seeds as sacred, that are in us, in our DNA, but they're in the land, and how do we protect them for future generations? So these are some of our programmatic areas. We also have a small fund, the Minonibi Fund, that is a word in my Anishinaabe. It means good water fund. They're small grants just to help hydrate and supports projects for cultural revitalization and land protection. And all of our members form the Teha Alliance, which is a global alliance of Indigenous peoples. And we continue our storyscapes, again, the legacy of Phil's work, through a resource library and a new, relatively new, we just finished finishing our 3rd season of the Native Seed Pod podcast, focused on talking with elders and activists and leaders about food traditions, food sovereignty, but as it relates, of course, to water, land, seeds, climate change, all of those various areas. So if you haven't heard that, it's a wonderful, fun podcast, and we'll share the link in the chat. And so we work again across Turtle Island. We focus very locally in California, but we work really all around the Americas and the Pacific, and are so honored to serve and learn in reciprocal ways with so many proud Indigenous peoples who are part of this renaissance that the Mojave peoples are leading with Phil's legacy, and also Matt and your family and Michael and your family continuing to hold the line and protect your culture. Heron Shadow is a beautiful farm. I'll just show you a few pictures. You're all invited. We have ongoing programs happening there. It was a safe place to gather during COVID because we had a lot of space, just like the Old Woman Mountains. And we learned so much from the NALC and how they acquired, stewarded, and really have protected the Old Woman Mountains as a healing landscape. And I love the way that you run the programs there as a preserve, as an ecocultural preserve. So we call Heron Shadow an ecocultural oasis for all people to come and learn and share. Connect with community. We did a traditional fire burn, which was wonderful, bringing back those traditional land management practices. So for us, it's really all about community collaboration, communications, as you emphasized earlier, Matthew, and really Indigenous intelligence and creativity to solve these problems that we're facing today that are so immense. But we know together, when we work on the land, we feel the power and strength and resilience of our communities. We're growing all kinds, we'll nerd out on seeds another time, Matthew, but we're growing all kinds of beautiful squashes and corn varieties and bean varieties, many from the southwestern area, as we are all having drier conditions. The desert farmers are really such, wise scientists, and we can learn so much from the desert farmers about growing food with little water and lots of heat. We grow Tahona Autumn tepary beans and Taos Pueblo Blue Hubbard squashes and Buffalo Creek squash, and so many varieties. Some of the beans here, Scarlet Runner, also known as the bear paw bean from the Seneca Nation. So just some of the beautiful images. And we are working on decolonizing our diet with chefs and cooks and traditional gatherers, and bringing back those recipes and the stories of our medicines. One of our real touch points, Northern Stars, as an elder, is Leroy Little Bear, the Blackfoot elder. And he came to our land and he shared a beautiful quote and a teaching with us that I share with all of you. And that as Indigenous peoples, we always find our cultural resilience in the medicines of the land. And so that's really what we're all dedicated to. And we know the Mojave Desert is filled with medicine. It is a place of great abundance and beauty. And may we continue to work together to protect it for your people and your sovereignty in future generations. Just a little bit more about, it's about the youth, and it's about sustaining and nourishing Mother Earth so she can continue to nourish us. Chemehuevi, thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Melissa.
Great,
Come on, thank you.
great.
So we've been waiting patiently for Ashley. Thank you for going last.
Yeah, of
I'm
course.
very excited to hear about Fort Mojave and the different initiatives.
Sure. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen a little bit. It'll help me stay on track here and help us get through it. Let's see. So just a little bit about me. Kamadu, Nyaptimoy Ashley Hemmers, Avikwame Monvich Hokolomank. And what I'm saying is I'm introducing you. My name's Ashley Hemmers. And in our tradition at Fort Mojave, we always let our relatives know where we come from, and that's Avikwame, Spirit Mountain. Our kids are learning it. When we greet each other in our tribal government, we greet each other in this way. We think it's important to kind of make sure that people understand that we have this relationship with the land because the land is who we believe protect us. And so I wanted to give you a little bit of a background on how I ended up here on this panel, right? So I'm, not too many people have met a Mojave from the Mojave Desert, but that's who I am, born and raised here. And one of the interesting things I thought about when I was putting together these slides was my first time in a college history classroom, the topic was Western expansion. And when the professor pulled up the slide, he pulled up the slide of Edward S. Curtis and Musa. And I was surprised because this is a picture of her that I've seen my entire life being raised in my grandmother's home. It's actually my grandmother's aunt. And so when we think about the Mojave Desert and we think about Western expansion and we think about how people relate to what happened here, what we don't think about often is the people who still live here, the people who are from these pictures, and the people who continue to live in the culture that these pictures represent. And so when I asked that professor, like, why do you have my aunt's picture? This is something that was right by our kitchen table the whole time I was growing up. He didn't know how to respond. And I think that that's one of the reasons why I really enjoy programs like this, because it helps bring together that opportunity to have a dialect with people who may want to have some knowledge of the Mojave Desert, but may not know where it starts and may not know how far back that relationship begins. And that next picture you see there is me at Ward Valley. So while the adults were running around, Ward Valley was my first non-paying job, I like to say. I volunteered at the Ward Valley office here in Needles, and it was my first job. What we did was when all of the advocates were having conversation with the BLM and with all of these agencies, federal and state, and going back and forth in, my tribe's chambers, the elders and the children were out there sitting. And we sat for 120 days. And I remember the night that we had the standoff pretty significantly because my mother had gone to work, and I was fortunate enough to be raised alongside with my grandmother, who I still care for, who is a survivor of Poston internment camp, as well as Phoenix Indian boarding school, as well as the relocation program. And so, my background is really studying how tribes moved from the tribal space to sovereign development in that short time span. And my focus is in that area because for the Mojave, it didn't happen over a period of 400 years. It happened over a period of 50 years. And it happened over a period in 3 generations that you can see between my grandmother, who is still fortunate enough to be with us, my mother, and myself. And you can see that rapid transformation and change. And it kind of culminated for my family at the Ward Valley standoff. And so for me, you know, I didn't know how blessed I was to be able to have access to my grandmother, who at that time had enough healing in her to be willing to share our culture, share our songs, share our language, give those things that she couldn't give to my mother and her siblings, give those things to me and, you know, my cousins at our younger age. And I remember being really upset the night of the standoff because it was in February, it was cold, and I was younger, and there was a you know, there was a Valentine's Day dance, and I couldn't go to the dance. And I was like, why can't I go to this dance? Like, I've been out there, I've carried water, I've tended the fire, you know, nothing's gonna happen. And I remember going over that bridge and seeing the rapid, you know, movement, seeing the fear in the adults, and, you know, seeing the prayer in the elders. And I knew something was different. And I knew at that point that I was different. And so what the elders were doing were they were talking to the adults to say, hey, you know, we need to do this in a peaceful manner. You know, we have other people who can do this. They're going to, you know, be at the front of the line. And one of my uncles from the Khatan Nation began to sing, and he told us, you know, we're going to need to stand this line, and you guys are going to need to dance. And I remember dancing that night and knowing that at that point, I knew who I was. I felt something there that bridged me and my grandmother, that bridged me and my people, and showed me that, you know, at some point, someone's going to have to stand for the land, and it's going to be us. And unfortunately, that means I can't go to do the Valentine's dance, but that there's something other that's happening. There's something else that's happening that we need to kind of be mindful of. And that's kind of how I migrated over into the work that I do now to rebuild tribal nations and to help have those conversations with federal and state authorities, not from a place of, you know, sharing our cultural significance, but from a place of, you know, making sure that there's an understanding between those government to government boundaries, and also that those government to government boundaries are not only for us to explain this history to those partners, but for those partners to step up and start to understand what that means, what those impacts have been, and what those impacts have been to not only the people that had to survive them, but the grandchildren that had to pick up those pieces. And so I wanted to share a quote really quickly. And I share this with the permission from his daughter. We share this throughout our tribal government. One of our former leaders, Mr. Llewellyn Berkman, he initiated a lot of protection efforts of the Mojave before, you know, before people started moving so aggressively. And, you know, one of the things that he says that guides our administration here at Fort Mojave is that, you know, the desert has been our home, and we have an extreme and solemn relationship with this land. And it's not one of ownership, it's one of protection, it's one of, you know, a symbiotism of being together, being a part of it, and one of respect. And we have nowhere else to go. And so when we lead our conversations through conservation, you know, we try to help others understand that, you know, some folks might see the Mojave as a wasteland, but when we look at our mountains and when we look at our desert, we see life and we see creation and we see medicine. And so for us, if our land is hurting, then our people is hurting. So we want to make sure that, you know, when we have the opportunity to talk about the desert, that folks understand that it's not just one conversation of ownership, but it's a conversation of the relationship that has been formed over thousands of generations. Because for our people, we believe we come from this place. We believe that that mountain gave us life. And it's hard to separate that. And so when we have the conversations about environmental stewardship, that's what leads us into those conversations. And so I wanted to I have a couple more slides that I'll share really quickly, but I wanted to just say that in current conservation circles, words like environmental stewardship and traditional ecological knowledge have helped to form a bridge of understanding between indigenous ideologies and, mainstream conservation models. What we're seeing now, though, is that some of those conservation models are co-opting those terms like traditional ecological knowledge to help preserve them in a way that's different than an indigenous point of view. So I would just like to leave you with, if you are interested in helping to become allies with indigenous communities for environmental stewardship, make sure that you have kind of an up-to-date knowledge of how folks are using terms like traditional ecological knowledge, how they're using terms like indigenous traditional ecological knowledge, and where they're getting the knowledge from, and if they are citing where they're getting the knowledge from, and if the folks that they're citing are aware that they're citing them, and if those citations mean that there has been the ability for those folks who are being cited to actively participate in the point of view that's being pushed forward. And that is so complicated, but I want to make sure that there are those 4 steps because now that there is a large awareness of what we've been doing to our land, and with the drought and with more issues stemming from climate change, one of the things that folks are going to do is they're going to race to the models that have worked, and they're going to shift them, which we've already seen in this in these types of circles. And we want to make sure that indigenous communities don't lose their voice even further. And so I'll just talk a little bit about Avikwame. Avikwame is currently, there's a movement to help make it a U.S. national park. There are different complexities about what that might mean, what that means for the tribe surrounding. And what has happened with the folks who've been involved and for almost 30 years now has been we've been able to come to a point of reciprocity to an agreement to a current map of what could potentially protect our sacred space. And recently, Congresswoman Dina Titus introduced HR 6751, which would establish the Avikwame National Monument. And I'd just like to let people know that President Biden continues to have the ability to establish this area through the Antiquities Act. But if you want to know more about Fort Mojave's efforts or other efforts along this movement, please visit honorspiritmountain.org. And then on their social media, you can visit at Honor of Avikwame as well. And so I'd like to leave you with a couple of steps of how to get involved. The first one is just be informed about those terms. The second one is honor past voices. Our voices are out there. They're in the newsletters. They're in the work that Phil did. They're in the dispatches. They're in the Mojave Project. And they're in these specific places. And I would just encourage you to spend time doing your research and learning about all of these special places, because once you learn about that story, it will change you and it will make you more invested in how the land has shaped the relationship it has with the people who still steward it. And then finally, use your voice, know who your leaders are. We know who the president is. We know who our senators are. We know who our congresspeople are. Make sure you know what they think about traditional ecological knowledge, if they even think about it. I saw a lot of questions about Katie's. Make sure they think, if you're in California, what they feel about SB 307, which is a public law that helped to, protect it when the federal government wouldn't. And make sure to know that at any given time, Native Native nations are constantly having to have ongoing conversations at every level, federal, state, and local, to make sure at some point that we can protect these spaces. So use your voice, and then finally get social. You know, if you have social media, share the information, share access to it. Let your family and friends know why it's important to you. That always helps us. And if you want to know more about me, you know, you can check me out at Tribal Reclamation. I also have an oral history in How We Go Home, which was published by Voice of Witness. And there's more about that story if you're interested. So hopefully I did a lot in a little time, because I know we're running kind of short on time, but I'm so grateful to be here with everyone, and I'm grateful to have this opportunity to hear and share and learn, and it's been such a fruitful conversation so far, so thank you.
Rich, thank you.
Great job.
Thank you. Yeah,
Great
that was
job.
wonderful.
Yes,
So-
Achim, Ashley, I think we saved the best for last. Yeah, you gave us a tremendous story of your life and your people's life in the Mojave. That's exciting, and yeah, I love being at your community. I've been there on various occasions and met some of the elders at Mojave, and wow, a very strong people.
And the 25-year anniversary is coming up in February of 2023 for Ward Valley. So if you're interested, please come, please celebrate, please continue that story. People need to know that we stopped it.
That's super. That's a big.
I'd like to say something. It's Matthew.
Mhm.
We need to start a Ward Valley Museum. We need to do that.
Michael, did you have any questions for the group that you would like to express, or should we look at open up possibly to anyone in the audience to ask a question? I just want to say that if you raise your virtual hand and have a question, we can try to take a couple with you actually on screen, which I think is a nicer way to do this. So, but at first I thought, Michael, if you had something that you wanted to.
Yeah, well, I just want to
Listen.
say thank you. Yeah, thank you to everyone. You've shared so much wisdom, and I just would say one of the questions I might ask is, what do each of you think would be best ways of collaborating, and how can we work together more effectively in our advocacy for the desert? Yeah, but go ahead, Matt. Go ahead too.
I was going to mention, Michael, that it would be good to really expound on the learning landscapes and the success that we've had with the NALC. And because of COVID over the past couple of years, you know, we did a virtual learning landscape a couple of years ago, and it really went over well. And recently we were out at Coyote Hole for the learning landscape, but that was to bring young Native students out to these properties to educate them about these lands and what it is and what it means to them, what it should mean to them, but educate them about the different plants and animals and food sustenance, medicines, the spiritual relationship, you know, how significant it is. And the curriculums that the NALC had set up were pretty nice. The kids really get it. And they're having more respect for places like that. And not just one place, but all the places that they visit now. And I'm proud of what the NALC has done with that. But if we could share more about the learning landscapes, show how we're getting the kids involved, that would really be great. And another thing, like you just mentioned, how can we go forward? I think setting up some type of roundtable group, a grassroots group to talk about these issues of how we can collaborate and work together. And I've done this before with the Indigenous Resource Management up in Denver years ago, back in the late 80s and 90s. And some of the things that we have done was trying to work with the Council of Energy Resource Tribes and trying to communicate with government entities about being involved in dialogue on projects rather than coming in down the line. You know, we wanted to be there at the beginning of the inception of programs or projects to have some type of communication, some type of tribal voice in concerns. And it was working for the most part with the government entities, mostly the Department of Defense and Department of Energy and things like that. But you know, we had done that in the past, and collaboration is really good. And I think we should move forward on that.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Yeah, definitely the learning landscapes are such a wonderful opportunity for families to be together. And it is true that we had to slow it down some during COVID, of course. And then we did it online a couple of times, and it actually was beneficial. It was good. So there were, you know, families from many different places who could participate that way that maybe wouldn't have been able to make the trip or take the 2 or 3 days and go out for the physical camping time. But we did have a retreat just this past fall in person again, and so we're planning to do that again in the near future. We've had support from other organizations, including the Anderson Foundation and the Pawanka Fund, and so their help is allowing us to continue our learning landscapes. And so, yeah, tune into our website to be kept updated on upcoming events. And yes, having a follow-up gathering is a wonderful idea. And because we have so much wisdom and we've got so many different communities that are doing work in so many great ways, if we can be more aware of what each other are doing and we can collaborate more, I think we can get more done. We can meet the challenges even better.
I'll just add thank you. And on behalf of the Cultural Conservancy, you know, Matt, Michael, and Ashley, we are there for you any way we can support. We are completely in solidarity with you all, and so happy to help with some of these next steps. And meeting in person now, or even some Zoom meetings, is fantastic. And also there is a growing group of people, as you know, at ASU, Arizona State University, who are very concerned about the Mojave, and we're part of Ward Valley and doing archival research on Ward Valley. So I know that they would be very interested, and we have, you know, resources at ASU that could be helpful as well. Miigwech.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I think that having the museum or some center that keeps the story of Ward Valley is super. So that could be part of the conversations. Yeah.
Yeah. It looked like we had one hand raised, but I don't see it any longer. So I'm not sure, before we close up the conversation, if anyone in the audience would like to pose a question to the group. If you can raise your virtual hand. But if not, I just want to thank everyone for this beautiful conversation. I learned a lot this evening, and I'm glad that Mojave Project and the Barrick Museum, we can share this with people. You know, it is so nice to meet in person, but you know, it's great to do this as well, because a lot of people who weren't able to join us in person were able to do so. We will have this conversation archived. It will be available in a week or week and a half or so at the YouTube page for the Barrick Museum. We also have the 2 past conversations archived, and we have our last webinar of the series, African American Homesteading in Lanphier Valley, will be in July towards the end of the month. So you can register for that conversation as well. Thank you so much, everyone. And I want to thank the audience for listening and taking the time this evening to join us.
Thank you all very much.
Thank
Quite
you
an
all.
honor.
Thank you, everyone. Yes, it's
Wonderful
good,
to be with you.
good
Have a
sharing.
great night.
Yeah.
Take care. Good night.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. This was great.